elementary students. My name is Diana Wirtz, and I am a liaison here at the Family Resource Center. We're so pleased today to have three presenters for our webinar, and I will introduce them now. Wanda Taylor, Sue Ahn, and Ashley Latfabadi are behavior intervention teachers here from FCPS Behavior Intervention Services. Behavior Intervention Services provides behavioral intervention and support for students receiving general education or special education in grades pre-K through 12. Behavior intervention teachers are assigned to each pyramid and work closely to collaborate with the administrators and staff to develop systematic plans for behavior. Welcome, Wanda, Sue, and Ashley. I will now turn it over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Wanda Taylor. Thank you, Diana, for that wonderful introduction. So let's look at this image and kind of take a look at what brought us here today. So looking at these four pictures, what brought you here today? Choose an image that represents why you came today. Is it one, to strengthen your basic knowledge? Is it two, to gain confidence in what you're already doing? Is it three, to learn preventative strategies? Or is it for all of the above? Take some time to reflect which one fits you best. I'm kind of a number 4 person. I'm here for all of it. All right. So now let's take a moment to look at our agenda for today. So today we are going to dive deeper into how to communicate routines and procedures to develop follow-through. We are going to work on how to communicate expectations and directions effectively. We're going to focus on how to communicate praise and reinforcement appropriately. We are going to go through some scenarios and try to put all the pieces together of all the learning that we've done so far today. And finally, leave you with some takeaway tips. So first, for our opening activity, we're going to find the thing that often throws us off our routine. Many of us have started diets before or started workout routines, and we were super into the routine, and then inevitably that something happens, and then we're back to eating a full sleeve of Oreos, or in my case, a full sleeve of Girl Scout cookies. And the only exercise we're doing is walking from the couch to the fridge. So for lots of people, establishing and maintaining solid household routines, it has a similar pattern. We may meal plan or have our house running real smoothly, and then that thing happens. Could be the car breaks down, someone is sick, we have an argument with one of our kids, or someone is tossing and turning all night long, and bam, the next thing we know it, we start compromising on the rules, and we find ourselves a couple weeks or a couple of days later looking up a very steep hill of how to get back on track where we once were. So if you have trouble thinking, I invite you to think about what is that one thing that is over the next couple of weeks? What is that one thing that throws you off? And how can you get back on track? Knowing what knocks us off our course is very important, because then we can plan and prepare for that thing and respond differently the next time. I know it sounds very simple, but it does take loads and loads of practice and hard work to make these routines become habits. Because remember, in times of hardship or difficulty, we don't have to be perfect. Our goal is just to have our routines going 80% of the time. So now we're going to take a little time to talk a little further about routines, procedures, and expectations. So routines are like that bigger picture to-dos. You probably have many routines in your household that you don't even know really exist. For example, it could be your morning routine, your coming home from work or school routine, even coming back inside the house routine, like take off your shoes, take off your jacket, wash your hands, etc. There are many routines that we are already doing in our household. Then we talk about procedures. So house within routines are those countless procedures. Procedures are how you want something done. So your dinner time routine, your routine may be eat dinner, excuse yourself from the table, and put the dishes in the sink. This seems simple enough, but let's break down. For some children, these pictured steps would be a lot more steps than they typically would do when they're washing their hands. When my coworker tells her children to go to bed, she wants their pillows and their blankets looking nice without any wrinkles. And that's all from her learning history of being raised in a family with parents who were both military and had a strict military household. Needless to say, some of those routines and procedures were passed down from her, and now she's passed them down to her children for better or worse. In the beginning of learning the procedure as a parent, you have to be very involved with every step, even showing them visuals or guiding them verbally through it. As these procedures start to become more of a habit, we can start fading on support. But in the beginning, we're going to have to be there and give lots of support to your child as they are mastering these steps to the routines and procedures. Okay. Next up is expectations. So thinking about expectations, those are what you think your child should do. Strong routines and procedures help set those expectations for your child because they let the child know what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. Whether you want to refer to them as expectations or rules, they are one and the same. Many expectations are consistent when our children are going to the same place, such as the playground or the house. But when it's a new place or a place where they might have had difficulty time at, it might be important to set that expectation prior to entering that location. So you're going to let them know, we're getting ready to go here, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the behavior I expect. So we're going to put all that together. All right. So what types of routines? Routines can be different for each household. Some possible routines you may need may be a morning routine on how to get out the house in a timely manner for school. We all can kind of relate to that. What it looks like to come home, where to put your shoes, hang your backpack, homework routines, routines around screen time, even evening or bedtime routines. You may consider talking as a family to plan out routines in case of an emergency, such as a fire. So take a moment and just write down on this piece of paper or think and reflect of routines that you would like to create or strengthen in your home. I'll give you a second to kind of just think. Okay. So the importance of routines, procedures, and expectations. As your child is learning and practicing routines, procedures, and expectations, remember you are the person who's developing and setting these plans. It's our job to find time to teach those routines ahead of time and practice the routines frequently So your child will start to build these habits. As your child is learning and practicing these routines, you want to make sure that you are giving them feedback and acknowledging their successes. Okay. So think for a moment. If someone verbally tells you how to make a recipe, how confident would you be executing that recipe from memory from only hearing it one time? That's the same that's true for our children. And routines, procedures, and expectations, we hold them to. Teaching and practicing is an ongoing process that one will need to repeat repeated efforts and adaptations along the way. So you're going to teach, practice, and reinforce your routines, procedures, and expectations. Okay. But like any other behavior or skill, we need to directly teach out our children routines, procedures, and expectations we hold them to. So if you remember nothing else from today, when thinking about teaching your routines, expectations, and procedures, you have to make it fun, keep it consistent, and keep it simple. So how to make it fun? So how many here had to do something like, how many here do something like watch TV, listen to music or podcast while doing laundry or cleaning the house? I know I do. I always listen to music. This is a way of distracting yourself from something you might not want to do in the moment. So how do we make it fun for your child? You might consider put a song on to see if you could get something done before the song finishes. Have a cleaning dance party. Or how about even having balling your dirty clothes up and throw them in the hamper, like who can make the basket? Or maybe even adding a mystery element chore to the selection by having your child choose for some popsicle sticks that you wrote the chore on, or folded up cards. Call it a distraction, call it tricks, call it whatever you want to call it, but that's just how the human brain works. Okay. Now, how to keep it consistent. So this is one of the lessons that when we were working on this presentation, that my coworker, we were talking about this, that she learned the other day about talking to her son about school. And she was talking to her son about school, but he was engaged in looking at TV instead of listening to her. So being the behavior person that she was, she started with those I statements. I feel sad when I'm speaking to you, but you're looking at the TV instead. So her son turned to her and looked at her and said, I talk to you and you're on your phone. She felt horrible because you know what, guys? He was right. She was constantly checking her messages and getting on Instagram. And so now she started to catch herself on how often her first instinct was that thing that I'm doing with my phone is more important than what he's showing me. But if I'm going to say that that's one of our rules in our house, when we're listening to others while they're speaking to us, she wants to make sure that she's walking the walk and talking the talk, no matter how justified she is as an adult. And I know a lot of you guys could probably relate to that whole talking to me while I'm watching TV or on my phone. Another key is visuals, 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 visuals. And when I say make it visuals, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could be on a scratch sheet of paper or written in pencil, but it's the expectations and the rules that you all agree to. So this way, when your child is not meeting that expectation, it's not you, the adult, being unfair. It's the rules that you all agreed on together as a family, and that's setting the standard. As your child grows up, the expectations will change. And as these expectations change, this should be openly communicated with your child so they feel like they are part of the conversation and they take some ownership over the changes. When we make changes to our routines, it's always a good idea to maybe have a family meeting at dinner and get everyone's thoughts out. That's a suggestion. All right. How to keep it simple. I am recommending starting off small and simple when developing these plans. You want to pick rules or expectations that can help your child see the value in them. Ones that you can constantly uphold and ones that your child can master. Think about those contracts that we sign. We're making a Facebook account or agreeing to the terms and agreements of the policy, making a purchase. Have you actually read those things? Well, I know my daughter, she reads them all, but there's very few. I have never really read all the fine print, I guess. So those expectations are gigantic because if you break them, it can be very costly. And without an advanced law degree, it's very difficult to understand them. So without comprehension, there's more likely ways that you're not going to abide by those rules. So your child may feel like that if you start off with way too many expectations. So it's much easier to start small than by starting big and then going small. So review and remember the routine that you wrote down that you would like to think about working on, and the strategy that you learned today that you could take away to strengthen this routine. And now we're going to turn it over to Sue to talk about what happens when things are still not working. Okay, Sue, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me? So you did everything that Wanda has taught you. You have taught your child, practiced and reinforced. So you should start to develop like a smooth flow. But what if it didn't? Then you also made it fun. You've been consistent. You give some time to make sure it's working, but it's still not working. So if you find that you're continuously repeating yourself, your child is not following through or doing what you want to roll out some of the most simple reasons why this is occurring first. And the most simple reason why your child may be exhibiting these problem behaviors or conflict that is occurring, it could be that they simply do not know what to do, or they may have not mastered what they are supposed to do. So let's dig a little deeper and ask ourselves some of these questions about the expectations. So in terms of following directions, there are 6 areas of focus when you're looking at the process to follow these directions. We think that it's very simple. You tell them what to do and they should know how to do it. But these are the questions that you should be thinking about. Does the child have the ability to perform the direction? Or when the direction is given, was it said in a way that was clear to your child? We also need to think about giving the direction as a statement versus a question. When the direction is given, is a caregiver allowing their child to process the direction? And finally, it is also really important to check to make sure your child understands what is being asked and that we give praise and reinforcement for following that direction. We need to make sure that as the person giving the direction, everything is ready and set up for success. So think about the direction you want to give and ask, does my child have what they need to perform the direction? Once my colleague asked her daughter to unload the top rack of the dishwasher, not realizing that she was not tall enough to reach it. She then realizes that she can't just do it on her own. She needs a stool to actually access and get to the dishes. If a caregiver asks their child to shove the driveway and put salt down, but the child has no idea where the snow shovel is or the salt, it may be that he or she, the caregiver, looks out the window and see an unshoveled driveway. So we want to make sure that prior to giving these directions, we make a mental checklist or a visual checklist for ourselves to determine if your child has everything they need to perform the direction. Again, before starting or stating the direction, eliminate those distractions such as like electronics. It's a distraction for us and it's a distraction for our children as well. So make sure that you're close to the child, which is important as well, that proximity. I have an occasion seeing my friend's child get instructions from upstairs when my friend is calling out when they're downstairs, and this not has worked out well. But when I see that they actually take the time to go downstairs and provide directions by getting close, looking at the child, and that close proximity, the directions are a lot more likely to be followed. So before giving your child the direction, make sure it is clear to understand. So for example, you can ask your child to take out the garbage. You might fail to explain that the garbage needs to go out to the outside trash can at the inside one, and then brought to the end of the driveway for pickup. If you're not clear with that, what is needed to happen with the garbage, it may never have gone outside or been moved towards the end of the driveway for pickup. So just in general, we have to think about what is our behavior or the caretaker's behavior to make sure that it is clarified what needs to happen, and how it needs to be done to the child. So knowing the difference between a statement and a question is really important to supporting a child being able to follow the direction. Sometimes we ask a question, and when we do, we are asking the child's permission. We're giving them opportunities to say no or yes. So for example, saying, would you like to do your homework? It opens the opportunity for a child to say no. So you can reframe that question as a statement or a direction. So instead saying, it's time to do homework. So you can even pair this direction with something visual, like a sticky note, like a start time and an end time. So when we use statements, we are telling the child what we are expecting them to do. Caregivers should be aware of tone, volume, body language when they're giving these directions, making sure that's very clear that it is direction and not a permission or an option. Another important aspect that we often overlook is processing time. Providing time for your child to process the direction. So for example, giving your child a wait time. Sometimes we think that they're able to process a lot of different information as quickly as we do. But with that wait time is a time that we wait or pause after they're giving the direction so that the child is able to take those extra moments and to think about the direction and begin planning process for how to achieve that. So if you need to, count in your head as you wait, or perhaps singing yourself a birthday song or thinking of a Jeopardy tune in your head will also help with the waiting. Sometimes we think a longer period is actually, think that our period that we gave a child a long time is actually really short. We kind of know this when we wash our hands and have to sing the birthday song twice. So having something that's concrete to anchor the time could be helpful to make sure that you're giving your child enough buffer time. And you can also just look at the time and determine when you will check for understanding, which is the next step. So checking for understanding is a great strategy and an important one and a necessary one. The goal is to learn directly from the child what they heard you say. So for example, have your child repeat back the directions that you have told. This can sound like, so tell me in your words what I asked you to do. And sometimes when there's a lot of noise in the house, you could even write down the information on a sticky note or have a checklist with the steps for your child to follow. And just be sure that you're giving as many directions or steps as they're able to process at once. And this could depend on your child's age, ability, and the activity. A visual may also be helpful in clarifying instructions to the steps of the directions. So reinforcing positive behaviors. We're going to dive a little deeper into this last area of focus when it comes to following directions. As you establish your routines and procedures and positive reinforcements of your child, this is all key in making sure that we're pushing the child towards positive behaviors. When we hear reinforcing, a lot of times people think it's rewarding for things that they're supposed to do anyway. But we want to make sure that we're, again, setting our child up for success towards what we want them to be doing and making good choices. Let's talk a little bit about demands and reinforcement. A demand is when we ask your child to do something that they may or may not want to do. So reinforcement is when your child has done something you want them to do, and then you give them feedback by acknowledging that behavior. So for example, a demand would be to go make your bed. And the reinforcement attached to the demand could be a verbal praise, like, wow, you made your bed. That's awesome. So when we think about how we acknowledge our child and provide them with reinforcement, we want to remember this demand to reinforcement ratio. That means that when we ask our child to do more or increase the demands that we're placing on them, but if we don't increase our acknowledgement or reinforcer, we're definitely going to see more behavior challenges. And a lot of times we think that this is bribing, or they should be doing what they do. But it's also, we see a lot of this as us as adults as well. Even in our jobs, we expect, even if we do what we're supposed to do, getting acknowledgement or kudos always encourages us to continue on the good work or even continue on better work. And so when we see this kind of imbalance of that demand to reinforcement ratio on adults, we call it burnout. But when we see it in kids, including teenagers, we can expect these challenging behaviors as they try to struggle to figure out how to cope with this imbalance. So again, as demand increases, so must reinforcement. So when this balance occurs, it is hoped that we see more of those behaviors we are looking for. So reinforcements, they come in all different shapes and sizes, and it is really for you to decide what kind of reinforcement you want to give. It could be a verbal praise, like, way to go, emptying the dishwasher without my help. It can be a special activity, such as game of Uno or a game of choice of the child with a family member, or a special movie night. It can be access to something that is tangible, like a new book or electronic device. It can be a gesture, such as just like a thumbs up or a high five. Those little acknowledgements go a long way in behavior, especially in that moment. Everyone is different, and certain reinforcers may work for one child better than another. And with that, I would also say if there is a specific behavior that is especially challenging that you're trying to change, think of that more enticing, the more desirable reinforcers, and just keep that aside just for that specific behavior. And that's the only way they can get that. And that could be a more of an incentive for them to change or do a certain expectation that you have set for that child. If they have access to that reinforcer, then they may not want or have that motivation to engage in that more difficult behaviors. So again, everyone is different, and certain reinforcers may work for one for another, and you know your child the best. And on a frequent basis, you may need to reflect. And it may work one time, it may not work another. So whether or not your reinforcer is working, or that you may need to consider different ideas, or how are you going to schedule it so that some reinforcers are in the moment, some reinforcers are something that they can build up to a bigger reinforcer. So think of it more holistically in terms of these positive reinforcers. So how do you reinforce? First, you have to decide, what will the reinforcer be? When will you reinforce? And what behaviors will you reinforce? Being mindful and being very specific, and really creating a plan of what you're deciding. Then you label the behavior for your child. So when you label it, it should be a behavior specific praise. So by behavior specific, it's not just good job or ready to go. We want to be as specific as possible. So for example, I like how you used your checklist after school today to get all your homework done. Or way to go with choosing your calm down strategy of breathing when your sister ate that last donut. I need that. Or like, oh, the teacher shared with me that you participated in class today by raising your hand. Good job. So by giving these behavior specific praise, your child knows exactly what it is that you're acknowledging and reinforcing. So after you decide and then you label, finally you deliver. So reinforcement, you want to provide that immediately when the behavior happens, so that the child knows that behavior and that is one that is being reinforced. So if your child procrastinates and at times does not brush his or her teeth before bed, you can first decide, okay, brushing teeth before bed. Then you want to label. The expectation is to brush your teeth at 7:45 p.m. Then deliver, provide a high five or love how you brush your teeth right at 7:45. So it is a process, and you want to make sure that you are doing decide, label, and deliver. So I mentioned a lot of different things, and I do want you to take a time to just reflect on some of these concepts and thinking about your child and his or her needs. I want you to choose what you want to change or focus for the next week. Is it thinking about how you're going to check for understanding each time? Are you going to really focusing on how you're going to allow that processing time with your child when giving those expectations? Are you going to focus on how you interact with your child? Is it a question versus statement? Is it a direction versus an option? Are you going to think about, are your directions clear and age appropriate to the child? Are you going to think about, is your child able to perform the direction and have all the ability, knowledge, and skills to be able to finish and complete that direction? Or is it going to be how you're going to put in place praise and reinforcement so that the child is able to have that balance of demand and reinforcement. So just take a few minutes, think about which of these topics you really want to be aware in the way you interact and how you support your child in the upcoming weeks.
All right, so now we're going to put all of these skills together. We're going to talk through some scenarios and think about the skills we talked about today and how they can problem solve these situations. So let's look at this first scenario. Your child consistently neglects homework, leading to missed assignments and failing grades. And despite your reminders, they seem uninterested in completing their schoolwork, causing stress and concern about their academic progress. Thinking about our three focuses of make it fun, keep it consistent, and keep it simple, some ideas might be make it fun. Create a dedicated study space. So you might designate a quiet and comfortable space specifically for homework only to minimize distractions and enhance focus. And together you could choose special fun pencils or decorations or relaxing music to make this special space and time only for homework. You might keep it consistent. Establish a consistent routine and set a daily homework time to create a predictable schedule. And that consistency really helps children understand and follow expectations. And keep it simple. Create simple checklists your child can check off to build momentum towards completion. So if you know they have to do their reading for 30 minutes and then a math worksheet and then if there's another piece of work that they need to do, putting those three things on a small checklist so they can check it off. I know I love to check off a to-do list, and that's something building that skill in your child too, while also building that momentum too. I'm almost done. I'm almost finished with this, with my homework. And also considering taking the time to communicate with teachers. Stay in touch with your child's teacher to monitor their progress and collaborate on strategies to address any underlying issues affecting their academic performance. So another scenario, chore rebellion. Your child refuses to participate in household chores, creating a tension at home. And despite, as the parent or as the caregiver setting those expectations and developing a chore routine, they resist contributing to the family responsibilities, leaving you frustrated with the imbalance of tasks. So some solutions you might consider is make the chore routine fun. Turn chores into a team effort by involving the whole family, all of us doing a chore at the same time. Assign tasks that suit each family member's abilities and interests. I know I hate to empty the dishwasher, but I'll happily vacuum. And so knowing which ones really kind of lean to things that they would rather do. And keep chores interesting by rotating those responsibilities. This prevents monotony and allows children to learn the various household skills over time. You might even consider creating a reward chart or system to acknowledge and celebrate completion of chores, because that positive reinforcement, like Sue was mentioning, can motivate children to participate willingly. Keep it consistent. Plan a consistent day of the week or time where chores are to be completed by the whole family. So your child can know the routine and not wait to be asked in the moment, and that may lead to that power struggle. And keep it simple. Make sure that that chore is being requested, that the child has easy access to the materials needed and can perform the task in a reasonable time. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about screen time. I know this can be a real difficult conversation in many homes. So your child becomes overly absorbed in digital devices, neglecting responsibilities and personal interactions, and attempts to limit screen time result in resistance, leading to power struggles and a disconnect between you and your child. Some strategies you might bring you success could be making it fun, encourage offline activities. So promoting a balance between online and offline activities and thinking about those offline activities being really focused on the students or your child's hobbies, sports, social interactions to really reduce the dependency on digital devices. Maybe you have a family game night once a week that's focused on those board games, things that are not screen dependent. And keep it consistent. Model healthy tech habits. I was just talking to a coworker earlier today about this, and being a positive role model by demonstrating healthy tech habits as a whole family. So limiting your own screen time and engaging in face-to-face interactions to set an example for your child. Because while we may be really focused on their screen time, we may not be reflecting on our own screen time and how much we actually are spending on our phone or watching TV, but we may be really focused on our child's. And finally, keep it simple. Set clear screen time rules. Establish clear and reasonable guidelines for screen time and communicate these rules to your child, ensuring they understand the expectations and the consequences. Let's talk about bedtime. So in this scenario, your child consistently resists bedtime routines, staying up late and impacting their sleep schedule. And despite your efforts to establish a calming bedtime routine, they resist, leading to fatigue, irritability, and disrupted family dynamics. So some strategies you might try thinking about those three: make it fun. Think of a way to begin that routine that is calming and winding down, but it still is kind of a desirable thing. It might be a special access to a calming coloring book or a special tea time with you. Really kind of focusing on those things that they like to do, but again, in that calm, maybe you put on a calm playlist as you start cleaning up from dinner. Establish a relaxing bedtime routine. Create a calming bedtime routine that includes such things as reading or dimming lights and avoiding stimulating activities before sleep for the whole family. And just consider reducing caffeine and sugar intake in the evening, as they can interfere with sleep. Um, and keep it simple. While as a parent, I think of the larger bedtime routine. I know we do dinner and then we go back and then we're going to do our teeth and then we're going to do there's lots of steps to our bedtime routine. But a lot of times I just communicate to my daughter, bath, books, bed. And that may be more effective than the list of the 8 things that she needs to do, because that seems really overwhelming, to get that all done before she gets to bed. And our last scenario is around mealtime meltdown. Your child refuses to eat certain foods or consistently displays disruptive behavior during meals. Efforts to encourage healthy eating habits and promote positive mealtime interactions are met with resistance, making mealtimes a source of stress for the entire family. So make it fun. Involve your child in meal planning. Allow your child to have a say in what one of the dinners might be and have them help prepare the meals. I know there's children's knives that they can use. I have my daughter cut up strawberries sometimes, and that involvement can increase their interest in trying new foods. So foster that pleasant and relaxed environment during meals and avoid pressuring your child to eat, and just focus on making the mealtime enjoyable with family conversations and positive interactions. And keep it consistent. Be patient, but persistent. Don't be discouraged by initial resistance. It may take several attempts before a child accepts a new food. We have a mealtime. We have a macaroni and sausage that we eat a lot. And just recently, after probably 5 or 6 times of having this, my son finally attempted to eat the sausage. My husband and I looked at each other. We didn't make a big deal of it, but we finally saw that he finally attempted after quite a few times of being exposed to that food. And finally, keep it simple. Introduce new foods gradually. You may not want to have 3 new foods that they've never seen before on their plate, or ones that that they've been hesitant around. Consider, having a small amount of the new food surrounded by food that they consistently enjoy. So as we close today, we'd like to leave you with these final tips. So tip 1, you set the tone. As a parent, you are the person setting the tone for your home and the behavior expectations. So for example, if your child needs to clean their room, let them know the expectations and the reinforcement attached. First, clean your room, then we will go to the park or maybe another activity that your child enjoys. Tip 2, show your child that you are fun. Make each interaction with your child an enjoyable experience so they will want to follow your directions to earn more time sharing experiences with you. Any chance you have to make it fun, do it. I've started playing fun music during our morning routine to start the day off on the right note. I was telling Wanda and Sue the other day, I taught my daughter the Tootsie Roll when I was playing music the other day. So anytime we have to make it a little fun, we try to do that. And tip 3, show your child that you can be trusted. Always say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't make empty threats. So for example, let's think about homework. After making multiple requests for your child to complete their homework, you may be tempted to say, if you don't complete your homework, we won't go to your cousin's. But you can't follow through as your cousin is watching your son so you can go to a doctor's appointment. If they don't finish their homework and you still end up going to your cousin's house, it may seem like you might not follow through with what you say. Tip 4, show your child that following your directions will benefit them. So give your child easy directions as often as possible and then reinforce immediately for following those directions. If you want to see good behavior, you need to reinforce what you want to see. And tip 5, reinforce often. In the early stages of establishing the routines and procedures of your home, reinforce every time you see your child completing the tasks you want to be done. For example, you may reinforce every time your child brushes their teeth before bed without reminders. And over time, you can start varying how often you reinforce, but consistency is important because your child must understand that certain behavior choices results in your child coming in contact with something that they value. So good choices result in good things happening. And you are teaching your child the behavior that you want to see. So we understand that all of these pre-planning and specific thinking about routines and procedures, the unexpected happens and the tantrums and difficult behavior still happens. So next month, we hope that you join us as we continue this conversation and discuss what happens when we have all of these strategies set, but the tantrums are still occurring. And at this point, Diana, I think we're ready for any questions.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Yeah.
We do have a question. So someone has asked, any chance you have a prepared scenario about getting ready for school on time?
So we don't have a prepared scenario, but I'm absolutely happy to talk through what it would look like. So I know that the morning routine can be really difficult. It's hard to get your children up and they have lots of things that need to get done before getting out the door. What are some tips to make this smoother? Wanda or Sue, I don't know if you want to share some thoughts.
So for me, I know having as much prepared for the school day before time is always a good option. I would always have like, if the shoes, have the shoes at the door, make sure lunch is all ready so it could be smooth, smooth transition. Definitely reinforce where your child is getting stuck. So yeah, they may be able to get out the bed and get dressed, but then they're kind of lingering. So you want to make sure that you are reinforcing those behaviors you want to see and not focusing in on what the child is not doing. So they may not be moving quick enough, but they got dressed. So I like the way you got dressed this morning. Let's play a game and see if you can beat the time or something like that.
And there's a lot of expectations and routines that go into the morning, and that is getting up, getting like ready physically, eating breakfast, and timing. There are a lot of skills that goes into it. So trying to address all those skills at once may be overwhelming and maybe something that a child may not want to even start. So it may be worthwhile to try to isolate that one specific behavior or one specific skill that you want to kind of get the foundation for before you build on it too much. So instead of expecting your child to be able to get up, get ready, and be at the door by a specific time, maybe the first thing is, like Wanda said, making sure maybe a timer that a child is up and have his or her clothes on by a certain time, and that's where the first reinforcer happens. Then work on the other parts of it. And this is also where you have to choose your battles. And we want that, you want your child to be independent at the end of the day, but you may have to build that that independence over time. So preparing as much as you can for the child so that it feels success and then they can build on that success. Sometimes the child, if they know that they're always getting yelled at in the morning because they're always late, may need to feel those moments of success to feel encouraged to continue to build on.
And I feel like we're very Wanda and Sue and I are answering in our keep it consistent, keep it simple, make it fun. Because my thought is also like, how can you make it fun? Where's that reinforcement? Like once you get into the car, do they get to listen to the song? Do they get to pick the music on the way in? Where is that kind of motivation for them to kind of get access to something? Or is there a time where you have a special handshake as you leave for them to go onto the bus that they get to add to, however you want to, but where's that moment where you can make that piece of the morning routine fun, kind of at the end where once they get through everything, they finally have that moment to have a little bit of joy.
Thank you. So we have another question. This parent has asked, my child is 5 years old in kindergarten and likes to talk a lot, gets distracted about random things while working on worksheets, especially with hard topics or projects. Do you have any suggestions on improving that? He also has problems with starting tasks.
So it sounds like you're already on the right track. I know it says that you've thought about things like breaking down the task a little bit, getting rid of distractions, stating the expectations about the behavior before starting the task, and reminding him about the reinforcement. I also want to think about developmentally thinking about a 5-year-old, like how much time are they really able to developmentally focus before they may need that break? So maybe it's kind of thinking about what their stamina is, and if they find that it only works about 10 minutes before they then kind of start getting distracted, it may be that you only set your routine may be 10 minutes of work, then a break. Then we go back to 10 minutes of work and then break. Because knowing kind of where their stamina is, and then maybe the next time it's 11 minutes, then it's 12, and then slowly start building up their ability to have longer time in those worksheets and on that homework. Sue or Wanda, did you have anything you wanted to share as well?
Yes. So I think to initiate in initiating work, giving your child choices makes them feel like, even if it's a less preferred task, maybe coupling it with a little bit more preferred and a little bit less preferred with that task. So giving that agency or feeling like they have a choice and say can always be helpful. And then also to making sure that you're cycling highly preferred activity with low preferred activity in that shorter, more age appropriate amount of time, as Ashley mentioned, I think could be very helpful as well. Just making sure like our expectations, again, is age appropriate and ability appropriate.
Thank you.
I agree with all that part.
Okay, so we do have another question. It's, how do you usually pick reinforcers for a kid, and how often do you examine whether it's still effective to encourage behaviors we want to see?
So I think in terms of, you just have to pay attention to what your child is looking at in the environment and what are they going towards in their environment. And those are the things you could possibly use as reinforcers. And then in terms of how often you change your reinforcers, I think that people's reinforcers naturally change over time. I mean, things that you like in one moment, you might not like in the next, or it might not be as motivating for you. Sue and Ashley, y'all want to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you try to figure out the reinforcer, children or people in general are motivated by different things. Some love the attention of either peers or adults, so that having that more of that social time is a reinforcer. Others just like that kind of in the moment feedback. So I think you can't just choose either only in the moment or like a long term or a bigger reinforcer. I think it is important to make sure that you're coupling both and using both. I mean, you know your child the best. Another thing that you can do is give them choices. Do you like this, like a snack as a reinforcer, or do you like 5 minutes a playtime with mom or dad or caretaker or whatever? Giving them those choices and then figuring out which one is most rewarding for them, kind of like like sports top 16 to see, go head to head to see which one they prefer more than others, can allow you to also see which one is highly motivating for them versus less. In terms of scheduling the reinforcer, if you give them too much too often, then they get what we call satiated. So you want to have a few different reinforcers that you cycle through, especially you'll see when it doesn't seem as enticing for them, and that's when you bring the other reinforcer in. And then holding that reinforcer, like I said before, for later. They can't have access to it until they kind of get hungry for it again, and then you bring it back in. So I think there's no science to it. It is looking at the situation, looking at your child, and then seeing, the younger they are, the more high levels of reinforcer they need. But then in terms of what to use and how often to use, whether it is one-to-one, the behavior to reinforcer, or maybe it's a range to one between 1 to 5 behaviors, maybe like a 3 one time and they get a reinforcer, or a 2, or it can be just time if they're able to do something for 5 minutes reinforcer, or range of time or 5 to 10 minutes and a reinforcer. All of that is so specific to your child and the expectation that you have or the activity, expectation, behavior that you have for him or her.
And I can say, personally, I have a rising kindergartner, 5-year-old, and we're having a little trouble with me leaving, after the bedtime routine's over and me actually leaving the room for her to fall asleep on the own. For the past 3 weeks, I've been really successful with giving her a Pokemon card in the morning. And I'm noticing the Pokemon cards aren't as interesting anymore. What I have left, she doesn't really care about. So I know this weekend, I'm realizing Pokemon cards aren't really working as well. So I myself need to start thinking about, okay, what do I have next? Is it maybe that like we'll play an Uno game? That's something she really likes to do when she gets home from school. What does that look like? So even I've been reflecting myself on when is it working and when is it not?
And developmentally, children that younger elementary age, they really do look up to the parents. So whatever you have a lot of enthusiasm for or that you love, I go into elementary school and all the kids have Stanley Cups. Like they don't know what Stanleys are. They're too young. I mean, they don't understand why. I mean, they don't have a card to put it in the cup hole. But the fact that everyone loves it, the parents love it, or whatever it may be, it creates that value for them. So the more enthusiasm you have for it, the way you introduce a reinforcer, all of that plays a factor as well.
Thank you. So there's a follow-up to the reinforcement question. How do you balance giving gold stars for the sake of giving gold stars versus giving meaningful praise?
Sue, I kind of feel like you touched a little bit about that earlier. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and it's a good question in that we want everything to be meaningful. But some students or some children just need more than other children. They just need a higher cycling of reinforcers, so those gold stars. But if studies show that if you're giving gold stars just to give gold stars, it not only not motivate them or encourage them towards behavior that you want, it actually discourages them, and it actually lowers their confidence, because everybody knows when something is not sincere or genuine, or if they didn't earn it. So the best thing to do is, if you have a child that needs more of those gold stars, instead of just giving it just to give it, you never want to do that. You just want to create opportunities so they can earn it. So you want to create more opportunities to earn more gold stars. So again, you want to give those kind of reinforcers that is earned. So that is very specific. So you want to name it and you want to reinforce it and praise it. But also, again, you don't want to just say, oh, you did a great job, you know, I don't know, washing your hands. And if they know that that's not something that they've been doing for years and it's not an easy thing. But you want to give them more opportunities for behaviors that you want them to see so that you can give them more opportunities for those gold stars. I'm not sure if I completely answered your question, but yeah.
And I also think that when you look at reinforcement, I think automatically we associate reinforcement with rewards, which is like a tangible, like a gold star or a Pokemon card or whatever it is. But sometimes reinforcement is just, hey, great job, right? And so that, when Sue was talking about that behavior specific praise, you may save the gold stars or kind of that reward chart or, those other things, those larger items of reinforcement for the skills you're really targeting right now or the skills you're really working on. Whereas that, like, hey, great job brushing your teeth, you might just have to be that in the moment thumbs up feedback can be where you're still giving that praise for more often for those other kind of lower things that they're doing more often just to make that reinforcement known. But those larger things you're targeting is where you're going to see that higher reinforcement or higher desirable things that they're really looking for.
And I think sometimes the reinforcement kind of gets mixed with reward or bribe, all those things, but you can just think of it as acknowledgement. So you're literally acknowledging that they're doing something that you want them to do. Just like we want to be acknowledged that we are continuing or doing expectations and that you're doing a good job. So, and also when we do that verbal praise or gestural praise or visual praise, if you do the same thing over and over again, it just like the toys or the reinforcers or whatever, it gets boring. So it could be just a long, intense gaze and just to be like, you're amazing. The way you did that was just so good. Or it could be a pat on the back. It can be just a random hug. It can just kind of vary it up a little bit so that they don't also get satiated by that type of praise. We have a tendency to default in general as humans to what comes easy and natural for us or what we like, but really just looking at all the different ways that you can, communicate to your child that what he or she did was just really positive is something that, a lot of these are intuitive, but we really want to be mindful and conscious of what we are doing and be very intentional about it. Because if we just kind of default to what's intuitive, studies show that teachers don't praise enough and they think that they praise a lot more. And parents also think that they engage or talk or praise their children a lot more than they do. So you always want to overdo what you think you're already doing well.
And I was just going to add, like, to think about, like, the purpose of reinforcement is to build those skills. So you're reinforcing those behaviors you want to see or those skills you want to see so that eventually, especially when it comes down to routines, procedures, that it becomes natural, becomes habitual. So you don't always have to, like, so if you start off and you're given a lot of reinforcement for those morning routines that you want to see, and over time, your child will master that and you won't have to give so much reinforcement because it becomes habitual and you don't have to tell them anymore. So we're trying to use reinforcement to build skills that can become habits and part of the child's repertoire. And they don't necessarily, and it's more intrinsically motivated for the child. And he may not, then so that the child doesn't need all that praise for a behavior that is habitual and they already mastered. You can move on to maybe something else. Does that make sense, y'all? Yeah, okay.
That's a lot of really great information. We have another question. This family has asked, how can you handle needing to use different techniques for reinforcement with different children in the same home? We have 2 kiddos who respond to nearly everything in different ways, so we approach them differently, but sometimes that causes jealousy and feelings of imbalance or unfairness.
Yeah, that's hard. And this idea of fair is so ingrained in us. And we always think that fair means same, and it doesn't. And so this is where we have to be more proactive than responsive to teach our children that fair is not same and it's not equal. It is getting what you need. And this is kind of the tenet of what we do as behaviorists and also as special educators. So the way that I always approach this is when we're not in the situation, we're just having that teaching moment when there are no emotions involved, where I use the phrase, I make the call, which is that in a sports game, whether it's basketball or baseball, there's always a referee or umpire that understands the bigger situation, that has experience, knowledge, and authority to make a call at that moment. And the players may not think it's fair, the fans may not think it's fair, and maybe sometimes they get it wrong a little bit, but they have the experience, the knowledge, and the authority to make that call. And so this is where, we say, hey, you two are different. You have different needs, likes, desires. At that moment, we're going to make a call. If you feel like this is something we can have a conversation about later, then yes, when we are not upset, we can come back and have a conversation to see if things can be different coming forward. But just know that from now on, the way we have certain expectations or rules or routines may be different for both of you because I make the call and you are both different people with different needs and strengths. And so it really has to do with more of this preventative and structured way of interacting, so that it's not always, it's not fair. It's like, well, remember, and then always kind of prompt back to remember, I make the call. So having that lesson or that teaching moment before, when it happens in the moment, you can say that cue phrase or the sentence that helps them remember the conversation or the teaching moment prior to that, so that they can, it may not completely change the behavior, but after a while, they understand that that negotiation is not going to work, because they're always looking for ways to negotiate or get into that power dynamic. So if you always stand by consistently, then they know over time that you make the call and that they can't shake or change your expectations.
Thank you. So we do have another question. Can you speak to cultural differences and how we advise families on behavioral issues at home?
Wow, this is a tough one because culture is just such a broad stroke, and every family culture, ethnic culture, region culture. Just know that Northern Virginia culture is very different than Southern Virginia culture. They have their own norms and situations. The way we can advise just generally to people with different cultures or the child rearing is, first and foremost, we want to make sure that whether you're from one culture or another, that it is child-centered. So however you interact with the child, is it meeting your need at that moment, or is it meeting the child's need, right? So however that looks like. Is it because you need the quiet in the house, or is it because the child needs to learn to emotionally regulate, in which case the way you would not deal with it, but the way you approach it will be very different. So I think first and foremost, it's always kind of going back to the child center. What is the need of the child at that moment, despite the need of mine? Another thing I think is to say, what is, again, going back to that need, we always have to default to what keeps the child feeling safe and wanted, and what is allowing the child to have an opportunity to feel like they can succeed, right? So however you go about creating these routines, I think it does go beyond. I think that cultural differences can work within these framework of routine structures and expectations. But I think keeping these overarching principles to approach, it can look very differently. So I know some cultures, they just have a tendency to express their emotions through volume and like physical expression, versus other cultures where it's more using words. So the way the expression is not as important as long as the foundation and the principles are there.
Thank you. So I would encourage any other participants, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. We have a few more minutes for questions. We will wait to see if there are any more, but really such great information. I'm learning a lot as a parent too, so thank you all so much. If there are no other questions, I will just highlight in the chat, our evaluation is there. If you will be so kind as to complete it and give us some feedback on our presentation. Thank the three of you so much for today. It was really great information, and we look forward to the rest of the series for our webinars. And thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Diana, I just wanted to plug our Behavior Intervention Services website, which is on the Fairfax County Public Schools website. It's also, when you get access to slide deck, this is actually a hyperlink directly to our website that also includes some other videos around power struggles and other supports that may help you if you are interested in looking at that.
That's great. Thank you so much. And yes, we will have that out with the slides in our follow-up email.